Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about Ethan Klein once again because he is really starting to resent his fans, and the other day he let them know it. If you weren't aware, Ethan's been talking about these two brothers recently that make rap/reggae music, and they've become big memes recently, and Ethan's become a fan of theirs, and he seems to be really entertained by them, and he is even looking to have them as guests on his podcast soon. But once Ethan started talking about him on his podcast, of course his audience started digging up all the dirt they could find on them, and people on the H3 subreddit started posting about how one of the Island Boys allegedly abused his girlfriend, and also how the Island Boys said some racist and homophobic stuff in the past, and it started to get a lot of attention on his subreddit, so Ethan had to acknowledge it, and he seemed more disappointed in his fans for bringing all this stuff up than in the Island Boys for actually doing it. So let's see what he had to say about his audience trying to cancel the Island Boys.
And I guess it's also just a joke about how the subreddit's been canceling every person. Every person that we mention as like a meme person gets canceled in the subreddit before we even get a chance to like enjoy having them on the show. Apparently the Island Boys are canceled. And I'm like, everybody gets to have fun with the Island Boys. And then all of the subreddits like Island Boys are canceled, Ethan can't talk to them. I'm like, dude, we discovered the Island Boys. Well. And now everybody else gets to enjoy them.
All right, so first of all, I don't know why he said we discovered the Island Boys. Like, I've been seeing them on TikTok for months now, and also I know they did the No Jumper podcast like a week before Ethan talked about them at all. He is definitely not the one that discovered the Island Boys. I don't know why he's saying that. And also, he sounds so stupid here for getting mad at his subreddit for calling out these guys for doing shitty stuff in their past. Like, that is exactly what his podcast is about now. Like, just calling people out and holding them responsible. Like, is Ethan the only one that's allowed to criticize people? Like, his audience learned this shit from him. This is all he does. It's just incredible. Like, if you have a channel where you're known for calling people out and consistently trying to hold them responsible and accountable, then your audience is going to do the same. And now he's just making it so obvious here that he really doesn't care about these issues as much as people think he does, because why would he be mad at his audience for this? This seems like something he'd want them to do. If you're so critical of other creators that have screwed up in the past and you will not let things go and you will consistently go after them and hold them responsible, it seems like you'd want to be made aware of the controversial things your guests have done in the past. It just blows my mind that he's getting mad at his fans for doing the exact same shit that he does. Like, is he saying that he'd rather not have people aware of the controversial things that these two have done? If that's true, then everything Ethan has been doing this past year, like trying to hold people accountable and responsible, is all bullshit. And he doesn't really care that much about the issues he's been talking about. He's just doing it because it gets him views and it makes him money, which I've been aware of since he started talking about David Dobrik, but now it's just painfully obvious. Like, in this video, he's literally more upset about his fans canceling these people than what these people actually did. It's amazing that he has the audacity to get mad at people for trying to cancel these two. Like, dude, you set the standard here. Everyone's just going by your rules. He's acting like his podcast is just fun and games and people goofing around, but no, dude, you spend like a quarter of it trying to cancel people and hold people accountable and bringing up people's past. He's acting like just because he likes these two, then we should just all let it slide. It's like, oh, we can only cancel people that I want to cancel. If I like the people, then I don't want to hear anything about it. He just sounds so ridiculous here. Like, please just have a little consistency so we could try to take you seriously for once. And I'm not totally sure, but I believe he was about to fly these two out to have them on his podcast. Like, isn't it a good thing that people brought up that they're not the best people and you probably shouldn't have them on your podcast before you did all that?
Yeah. When like the day after, or I think it was the day of the first time that we talked about them on the show, I jokingly to the crew was like, anybody want to take bets on how long until the Island Boys are canceled? And I said a week. And then it turned out to be like 2 days.
Yeah, it was like half a day. I mean, who would have guessed that those guys had a questionable past?
Who could have guessed?
How do people watch this podcast? Like, Ethan was criticizing David Dobrik last month because he had a beer in his car while he's driving. And now he's like, yeah, we knew these two didn't have the best past, but whatever, we gotta let things go. If it's so obvious that these two are trouble, why would you, out of all people, want to have them on your podcast? Ethan just really backed himself into a corner here because he holds people to such a high standard. So obviously his audience is gonna hold him and people that he associates with to that same standard. But most people have flaws and have screwed up in their past, so it's going to be hard to find guests that live up to his standard. Like, Ethan will still talk about David Dobrik, James Charles, Jake Paul, Logan Paul, and his fans are like, yeah, I'm glad you're still going after them. They need to be held responsible. So if you don't want your fans trying to cancel everything you do and everything your guests do, then maybe you should stop trying to cancel everything everyone else does. You can't have it both ways. You can't call out David Dobrik for every little thing he does 5 months after he apologized for what he did, and then expect your fans not to talk about really shitty things that your potential guests have done. And also he makes it pretty obvious that he's just jealous because other podcasts are having these two guys on, but now he can't. But he only has himself to blame for that, because he gets mad when people work with David Dobrik or still support him. It just doesn't make any sense. Why do you think David Dobrik should still be canceled and still address things, but then these two guys, you don't really give a shit what they do? And I mean, it's pretty obvious. When he likes somebody, he will let them get away with anything, but then if he doesn't like them, he will hold them to the highest standard and he will do whatever he can to cancel them. And also, he doesn't really care that much about the victims in James Charles' case or David Dobrik's case. He's just talking about them because he knows it gets him views, it makes him money, and it makes him look like the good guy. He only tries to act really sensitive and woke just because it's popular and it'll make him money.
Yeah, I saw that too. I did the whole Island Boy deep dive. He's like, you got to play that shit up because she called the police and you got to play the victim. I was like, all right, Island Boy. Such a shame too, because he's in my DMs and we were ready to have him on, but
turns out the island he's going to is
Alcatraz.
Or Alcatraz, yeah.
Rikers. Yeah, this island might be more of a castaway situation than a good island vibe. And then another girl that got canceled was one of these girls from The Bachelor that everyone was like, yo, have her on to talk about it. And then they're like, no, you can't have her on because she did all this stuff. Well, and the stuff was weird. I agree, it was weird. So,
and I also like how he doesn't even say that these people aren't the best people or what they did is really messed up. Like with David Dobrik, Jake Paul, and Keemstar, like these people are just the worst people alive to him. They can never redeem themselves. They are pieces of shit. But with the Island Boys and this girl from The Bachelor, it seems like he's more upset about his audience calling them out. And he's kind of mocking them for saying he shouldn't have them on his podcast. Like if these people are bad people and you spend a good amount of your podcast just trying to expose bad people, then why would you want to have them on your podcast to begin with? And if you remember a few weeks ago, his subreddit did the same exact thing with the YouTuber Jamari when H3 gave him a shout out and said go check out his channel, it's a good channel. And then his subreddit posted some videos of Jamari saying some offensive stuff towards Ethan and Hila, and of course they talked about it on their podcast and they're both really upset with it and they pretty much called him an asshole. So Ethan and Hila do like when their subreddit brings up people that have said offensive shit towards them, but when it comes to people that abuse their girlfriend or said racist or homophobic stuff that doesn't involve them, then they don't like their subreddit doing it. But I guess that's still not really even true, because I guarantee if his subreddit brought up some shit that David Dobrik did in his past that nobody's talked about yet, Ethan would love that. Like he'd love more shit to talk about regarding David Dobrik. It seems like the pattern here is if Ethan likes somebody, he doesn't care what they've done in their past. He doesn't want to hear anything bad that they've done unless it's towards him. But if it's somebody he doesn't like, any little controversial thing they've done in their past, he's going to try to turn it into the worst thing that's ever happened. And at this point, I think he's just making it so obvious that he doesn't really care that much about these issues. So now we're going to check out what the H3 subreddit had to say about Ethan getting mad at his fans for trying to cancel the Island Boys. So someone posted this while Ethan was talking about the sub on the podcast that we just watched. This person said, Ethan is dragging this sub and it is totally justified. And this has about 1,000 upvotes, and I think this is just pretty stupid because Ethan's getting mad at the sub for calling some guy out for abusing his girlfriend. Like that's exactly what Ethan does. Like why does Ethan have the right to call people out but the sub doesn't? And I'm not saying that this is a great subreddit or anything. I think it's insanely toxic and I'd hate if my fans were doing some of the stuff that the subreddit does, but it's very clear that Ethan has attracted a fan base this past year that's just trying to hold everyone accountable because Ethan tries to hold everyone accountable. If you're going to act like a social justice warrior on your podcast and get offended by everything and act really sensitive, then obviously you're going to attract those kinds of people. And it's hilarious because the person who posted this to the subreddit must have slowly realized what I was just saying, and they commented under their post saying, it is Ethan's fault that the fan base is this way. I wish that he would never have started the moral grandstanding because it is definitely going to come back and haunt him. I wish that the fan base was more chill and not so reactionary, but it is really Ethan's fault that the fan base is like this. So it's just hilarious because the person who made the original post saying that Ethan is justified dragging the sub is now saying it's all Ethan's fault. So I feel like his original post doesn't really make any sense because Ethan is acting like these people on the sub. Like Ethan is the kind of person that cancels everyone. So of course he's going to attract people that think the same as he does. But the problem Ethan has now is he doesn't really care about these issues that much. He only acts like a social justice warrior because it was getting him views and making him a ton of money and people respected him for calling people out. So his fan base is going to make him walk on eggshells because he's acting like he wants everyone else to walk on eggshells. So there's another comment on this post I want to read because this is really well said, and I think this person makes a really good point. He says, he's not clueless. He just realized that more than half of the sub and his audience will perform mental gymnastics to explain as to why it's okay when he does it and not when someone else does it. He kind of hit the gold mine. He found an audience that's obsessed with holding everyone accountable and riding for him in all of his battles and never holding him to the same standard. Never forget during the frenemies era when he was profiting off toxic Trisha, when she was being exposed for some of the shady stuff, he tried to just tell her not to look at the sub, it's crazy and they don't like him, and to ignore it, and even some of posts were being removed. But as soon as he has a falling out with her, then he pretends to care about all the shit she's done and uses the sub to help fight his battles and how much he loves the sub. I'm glad she's gone, but Ethan clearly pretends to care about a lot of issues way more than he does and sets the standards and rules that are on the extreme that he doesn't even believe or follow. And this is exactly right. Like, this person hit the nail on the head right here. Like, I've been saying it in a lot of my videos. When Ethan had Trisha on, he's pretending like, oh, she's a good person now, we can all trust her, even though a lot of people knew she was still a terrible person. But then, of course, right when she leaves, she's the worst person ever, and then he starts calling her out. And also in the beginning where he talks about his fans will do whatever they can to defend him, like, that's exactly right. Like, whenever someone calls Ethan out, like either on the sub or like another YouTuber, Ethan's basically like, oh, whatever, come on, like, I'm just joking around, I'm having a good time. And his fans will do whatever they can to defend him. Like, they will make up any excuse. And also whenever he says something edgy that he would generally call someone else out for saying, he will just say like, come on, you know I'm a good person, like, you guys are just being sensitive. Like in my last video, I talked about how Jamari said that Elo looked like Howard Stern, and they all got really offended by it. They said it was misogynistic and anti-Semitic, and they just act really sensitive. But then when Ethan says an overweight girl looks like a WWF wrestler, or looks like they washed up on the beach, or they look like a Twinkie, you're being too sensitive if you get offended, and he's just playing around and having a good time. It's all jokes. And with him having Trisha on the podcast, he let her get away with so much shit and didn't really mind that much at the time while the podcast was on. Like, if she was doing really bad shit, then you should have kicked her off. Like, if you think she was anti-Semitic and all that stuff, then why did you have her on your podcast? You cannot tell me that Ethan was a victim of Trisha and she abused him or she manipulated him. It was his podcast, it's his employees, he decided to start it, and he made a shitload of money off of it. He kept bringing her back on even after she did some really terrible shit. Like, I'd say his employee AB was a victim of Trisha, and Ethan did nothing to stand up for him. He let Trisha say that he should die, he should be fired, he's a piece of shit, and he would still continue to have her on the podcast. He put up with whatever he had to continue the podcast and keep making a ton of money with her. And then when the podcast ended, he's probably like, all right, well, my fans are dumb enough and will defend anything I say, so I can just go back and trash everything she did on the podcast and act like I was bullied by her. Even though Ethan was a bully with her, he enabled her. Like, he was sitting right next to her, agreeing with a lot of shit that she was saying, and they're going after people like crazy. He let her bully one of his employees, and the kid was like miserable. He was traumatized by it. Like, if Trisha Paytas was such a terrible person on the podcast and nobody can stand her, then why did Ethan continue it for such a long time? Like, somebody explain that to me. Like, it's insane for him to look back on the podcast and be like, oh man, she was such a piece of shit. Like, if she was, then why did you continue it? Why did you keep letting things happen? You were supporting that person and justifying things that she was saying and giving her an even bigger head. Alright, so now I'm gonna get back on track and read some more comments to that Reddit post. Someone said, anytime someone gets brought up in a remotely positive light, internet sleuths searching for any bad thing that person has ever said or done. And then the sub gets into an uproar, demanding a full press release and apology. Out comes the pitchforks and tiki torches. Then the issue gets addressed, rinse and repeat. And it's just incredible that an H3 fan could say this. Like, this person has no self-awareness at all. What he just described there is exactly what Ethan does. Like, if you have such a problem with people doing that, then why do you like when Ethan does it? Like, with David Dobrik, Ethan still continues to go after him, even though he gave an apology and was pretty genuine in it. But still, whenever Ethan brings him up, he'll say, I'm still waiting for an apology. I wish David just would address things. I wish he'd talk about things. He honestly acts like David owes him an apology or something. And you would think from the way Ethan talks about David Dobrik, Ethan would be really quick to address things like his brother-in-law allegedly essaying one of his fans. But of course, that's not the case, and Ethan still has not addressed things at all, and he would rather just continue going after David Dobrik. Like, not even the guy who actually did the essay in David Dobrik's case, like not even Dom, who's still on the internet making TikToks and YouTube videos. He'd rather talk about David Dobrik and how he's a piece of shit and is irredeemable. And then someone commented to the post that I just read and said, so true, they take everything way too serious, which that's what Ethan does. Like, I don't understand these people at all. Like, they have no self-awareness. But then someone commented under that and said, yeah, how dare these people have a problem with the itty-bitty crime of domestic abuse and assault. And of course that post has more upvotes than the other ones because these people get all worked up over someone having a beer in David Dobrik's car, or someone saying that Elo looks like Howard Stern. But then when it comes to domestic violence or abuse, it's like not a big deal and people are overreacting. It's just insane how confused Ethan and his subreddit are. Like, just one little thing and there will be a giant uproar. But then people call someone out for something a lot more serious than that, and everyone's like, oh, you're overreacting, you need to take it easy, we shouldn't be canceling people anymore. So here's another post I want to read where they're saying the same kind of thing that I am. This person said, Ethan cancels and holds everyone accountable and hammers in not having problematic people on, then gets surprised when the sub does the same and wants to hold him to the same standard. I love the podcast, but Ethan is definitely rules for others and not for me most of the time. And then someone commented on that and said, last week he literally said people are fucked up for working with Chris Brown and that it makes him sick, but he wanted to fly out another domestic abuser first class. So hypocritical, it blows my mind how he acts clueless. And people commented on that saying that it's not hypocritical because he didn't know they were domestic abusers when he was about to fly them out, which I will agree with because I don't think he knew they were domestic abusers before he was going to fly them out. But just the way he acted when he figured out that they were domestic abusers, like he didn't really seem mad at them. Like he seemed angry about the fact that he can't have them on his podcast anymore. And he seemed angry at his sub for exposing them. Like he made it seem like it was out of line that they would call these people out for being domestic abusers. So I don't know. I feel like Ethan is making less and less sense every day. And I feel like people are starting to catch on here. He's really starting to get that Hollywood liberal thinking, do as I say, not as I do. And it's really starting to backfire on him right now. All right, so that's about all I have to say for this video. So make sure you leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about all this. And then hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you all at the next video.